Hey guys! Tonight on Slumber Expeditions, we journey to a windswept hill in Turkey, where the contours of a gentle slope hide a secret that has dismantled our understanding of human dawn. We will explore Göbekli Tepe, a complex of stone circles so ancient they predate writing, the wheel, and even the invention of agriculture, a place that asks a profound and haunting question. Did the human impulse to believe in something greater than ourselves actually spark the very birth of civilization? Our exploration will wander through the excavated enclosures, where massive, T-shaped pillars stand in silent congregation, their surfaces alive with a menagerie of carved beasts. We'll sit with the archaeologists who uncovered this marvel, piecing together a new story of our past from fragments of flint and limestone. We will contemplate the motivations of the hunter-gatherers who, against all odds, chose to build a temple before they built a city, and we will ponder the mysterious reason they later chose to bury their masterpiece, gifting its secrets to the far future. So before you settle in, if you're finding comfort in these ancient enigmas, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. But only if you genuinely like what we do here. We would also love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to connect with a global community of curious minds who share this fascination with history's greatest puzzles. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's speculative journey together. Let the silent, patient stones of this forgotten hill guide you back to a time when humanity first dared to reach for the heavens. You are the patient silence of a hill, a mound of earth and stone known as Göbekli Tepe, resting for 12 millennia under the vast Turkish sky. Your slopes have felt the passage of countless seasons, the gentle erosion of rain and wind, the slow accumulation of soil that has hidden a profound secret deep within your heart. For centuries, you've been a quiet landmark, a place for shepherds to graze their flocks, your true nature slumbering beneath a blanket of wild grasses and thyme. Your silence is not an emptiness, but a waiting, a long-held breath spanning the entirety of recorded human history, from the rise of Sumer to the fall of Rome, through all the ages of empire and discovery, holding a story from a time before any of it began. Today, a shift is coming. A pair of human hands, calloused from tending sheep, is about to brush the dust from your skin, and your long vigil will slowly, patiently begin to end. The initial discovery was as unassuming as the hill itself. In 1994, a local shepherd, his life attuned to the subtle textures of the landscape, noticed a strangely smooth, elongated stone protruding from the earth. It was different from the surrounding flint and rubble, its edges too crisp, its form too regular. Curiosity, that timeless human spark, compelled him to clear the soil, revealing a long, bench-like slab of worked limestone. He reported his find, and this simple act set in motion a chain of events that would reverberate through the world of archaeology. The news eventually reached a German archaeologist, Klaus Schmidt, who was working at a nearby site. He recalled a cursory survey from the 1960s that had mentioned Göbekli Tepe, dismissing a few visible carved stones as insignificant medieval relics. But a deep-seated intuition, a feeling that the hill held something more, drew him to it. When he climbed to the summit, his experienced eyes immediately saw what had been overlooked. The ground was not merely rocky. It was a dense carpet of flint chips, the glittering residue of a massive, prehistoric tool-making operation. And then, he saw the telltale shapes, the tops of massive, T-shaped monoliths, barely breaking the surface, arranged in what was unmistakably a deliberate, geometric circle. In that moment, Schmidt knew he was standing on the precipice of a discovery that would rewrite history, a feeling he later described as a choice between walking away or dedicating the rest of his life to the hill. He chose the hill. The formal excavations that began in 1995 were initially met with a mixture of excitement and deep-seated skepticism. The goal was to understand the context and scale of these mysterious pillars. But as the team carefully peeled back the layers of earth, the sheer magnitude of the site began to reveal itself. There was a complete absence of the signs typically associated with early human settlements, no fragments of pottery, no remains of permanent mud brick dwellings, no hearths for daily cooking, no storage pits for grain. The only tools found were crafted from flint, characteristic of the pre-pottery Neolithic period. Then came the first scientific verdicts, radiocarbon dating of organic material from the construction mortar return dates clustering around 9600 BCE. The results sent a shockwave through the archaeological community. This was a time when humanity was universally understood to be living in small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers, their social structures simple, their technology limited to portable tools, their entire existence focused on the daily challenge of survival. The very notion that such people could have possessed the organizational capacity, the technical skill, and the collective will to quarry, transport, carve, and erect multi-ton stone pillars, some weighing in excess of 20 tons, and to arrange them into precise, monumental circles, was, according to every established model of human cultural evolution, an absolute impossibility. Göbekli Tepe stood as a serene, yet defiant, anomaly, a grand temple complex built by a society that, by all previous accounts, should not have existed. As the excavations expanded over subsequent seasons, the true architectural vision of Göbekli Tepe emerged from the earth. This was not a single, isolated shrine, but a vast complex of at least 20 distinct circular or oval enclosures, constructed in successive phases over many centuries. The earliest structures, found in the deepest layers, were the most monumental and sophisticated, suggesting that the peak of its construction and use occurred at the very dawn of its history. The archaeologists focused on several of these enclosures, designating them with letters, enclosures lettered A, B, C, and so on. Each one followed a strikingly consistent and awe-inspiring blueprint. A defining ring of meticulously fitted dry stone walls created a sacred precinct. Inside this wall stood a circle of enormous, T-shaped pillars, each a monolith of limestone. And at the very center of each circle stood two even more massive pillars, true giants that soared over 5 meters high, dominating the space. These central pillars were anchored directly into the living bedrock of the hill itself, their bases set into sockets carved with immense effort into the hard limestone floor. This was not architecture conceived for a single generation. It was a statement of permanence, a declaration of a connection to a place so profound that it was meant to endure for millennia, to outlast the people who built it and their very memory. The sheer scale of the labor involved in this undertaking is a subject of endless fascination and awe. The limestone for these colossal pillars was sourced from local bedrock quarries located on the limestone plateau, just a few hundred meters from the hilltop. In these quarries, one can still see the dramatic negative spaces where the pillars were painstakingly extracted. Using only stone moles, workers would have pounded a series of channels around the desired block, eventually undercutting it to fracture it free from the mother stone. The pillars were likely roughed out at the quarry to reduce their immense weight before the Herculean task of transportation began. To move a single 20-ton pillar from the quarry to the building site would have required the coordinated effort of hundreds of individuals, using ropes likely woven from plant fibers or leather, and a system of log rollers laid out on the path. teams of people would have pulled in unison, inching the multi-ton monolith up the gentle slope, a slow-motion ballet of human coordination and shared purpose. This was not the work of a lone shaman or a single small family group. This was a project that demanded a large, organized, and motivated labor force, a society capable of planning, feeding, and mobilizing a significant portion of its population for a project that offered no immediate, tangible return for survival. It was an act of pure belief, a testament to a powerful, unifying vision that could compel people to undertake a task of such monumental proportions, a symphony of human will carved in stone on a scale the world had never before witnessed. To stand within one of the partially excavated enclosures of Göbekli Tepe is to be surrounded by a silent, stone-bound parliament of enigmatic figures. The pillars, which from a distance might appear as simple architectural forms, reveal upon intimate inspection a deeply anthropomorphic character. The distinctive T-shape is not an abstract design choice. It is a powerful, stylized representation of the human form. The crossbar of the T forms a broad, faceless head, while the long, vertical shaft constitutes the body. This interpretation is confirmed by the exquisite details found on many of the pillars. Arms are carved in low relief, bent at the elbow, with long, delicate fingers meeting over the front of the pillar where a navel would be, as if in a gesture of contemplation or holding a sacred offering. Some of these stone beings are further personalized with carved belts from which loincloths hang, and stylized stoles or sashes are draped over their shoulders. They are impersonal, powerful, and silent sentinels. Their lack of individualized facial features suggests they do not represent specific chieftains or kings, but rather archetypal beings, venerated ancestors, powerful deities, or guardian spirits, frozen in an eternal vigil within their circular sanctuaries, their blank gazes fixed on a mystery we can only strive to comprehend. It is upon the broad surfaces of these pillars that the vibrant soul of Göbekli Tepe truly comes to life. The stone serves as a canvas for a breathtaking profusion of carvings, a dense and dynamic menagerie of the Neolithic world, rendered with a skill and confidence that belies their incredible age. The artists, wielding fine flint and obsidian burins, incise the limestone with a masterful touch. Here, a fox is captured in a fluid, leaping motion, its body sleek and elongated, its expression one of alert intelligence. There, a wild boar is frozen in a charging stance, its tusks prominent and deadly, its powerful musculature rendered with a palpable sense of energy and threat. A crane elegantly stretches its long neck, while a duck seems to glide serenely across the stone surface. Snakes, their scales meticulously detailed, slither vertically up the pillars, potent symbols of regeneration, the underworld, and perhaps a chthonic connection to the earth itself. But this is not a peaceful, pastoral idyll. The animal kingdom depicted here is one of raw power and inherent danger. There are lions, the fearsome apex predators of the Anatolian plains. There are scorpions, their curved tails and poised stingers a clear symbol of venom and death. There are wild bulls, massive, formidable creatures that embody untamed strength. This was a world where humanity lived in intimate and precarious proximity to powerful, non-human forces, beings that were both revered and feared, and whose favor was essential for survival. The distribution of this rich iconography is not random. It appears to follow a deliberate, though still cryptic, symbolic program. Enclosure C, for instance, is often referred to by researchers as the Circle of the Boars due to the overwhelming prevalence of that particular animal in its carvings. Enclosure B, in contrast, features a multitude of foxes and cranes. This pattern distribution has led to the compelling theory that different enclosures may have been associated with different social units within the larger society, perhaps distinct clans or kinship groups, each of which had its own totemic animal, its own spiritual patron and protector. The carvings, in this light, are far more than mere decoration. They are a form of stone heraldry, a symbolic language declaring identity, allegiance, and a shared mythological ancestry. They are the visual components of a complex oral tradition, stories of creation, of the sacred relationship between humans and animals, of a moral and spiritual universe that these early people inhabited and sought to understand. The pillars themselves, as anthropomorphic beings, may be seen as wearing or presenting these animals, carrying them as emblems of their specific power and nature, much like a medieval knight would bear a heraldic beast upon his shield to declare his lineage and his character. Among the most haunting and enigmatic motifs that recur throughout Göbekli Tepe are the stark depictions of headless humans. On several pillars, small, stylized human figures are shown conspicuously lacking heads. In one particularly poignant and eerie composition, a headless individual is accompanied by a large, meticulously carved vulture, the bird's beak often positioned close to the space where the human's head should be. This powerful imagery has sparked intense debate and has become a central piece of evidence for the theory that Göbekli Tepe was a center for a skull cult or for funerary practices involving excarnation. This was not an act of desecration, but a sacred and transformative process. The vulture, in this context, was likely seen as a psychopomp, a spiritual mediator that carried the soul from the world of the living to the realm of the ancestors. The physical body was returned to the cycle of nature through the agency of the carrion bird, and the skull, the bony vault that housed the seed of identity and consciousness, was often retrieved, carefully cleaned, and sometimes even plastered and painted with ochre to be venerated as a powerful relic of the ancestor. At Göbekli Tepe, the stone enclosures may have served as the sacred stage for these profound and deeply symbolic rituals, a place where the community collectively confronted the ultimate mystery of death and sought to ritually integrate their departed members into the ongoing spiritual life of the group, ensuring their presence and blessing for generations to come. The level of craftsmanship and artistic sophistication on display at Göbekli Tepe is a profound testament to a rich and well-developed artistic tradition. This was not a first, fumbling attempt at symbolic expression by a nascent culture. The fluid, confident lines, the dynamic and balanced compositions, the masterful use of both high and low relief to create depth and movement, all of these elements speak of a culture that had been developing its artistic vocabulary and technical skills for generations, perhaps for millennia. The artists possessed an intuitive understanding of how to use the natural contours and fissures of the limestone to give volume and a sense of life to their subjects. They understood narrative and perspective, creating scenes that were not static, but full of implied action and story. This artistic fluency forces us to completely abandon any lingering notion of these pre-pottery Neolithic people as primitive. They were, by any measure, masters of their chosen medium, and their medium was the very world that surrounded them, the stone of the hill, the animals of the plain, the fundamental cycles of life, death, and regeneration. They succeeded in translating their entire cosmology, their deepest beliefs and their most fearsome questions onto these enduring pillars, creating a permanent, three-dimensional sacred text, a scripture in stone whose complex language and profound poetry we are only just now, after 12,000 years, beginning to learn how to read. The profound silence that hangs over the site today is deeply deceptive. It is a silence that is filled to overflowing with the echoes of ancient stories, fervent prayers, and a worldview of immense depth, complexity, and spiritual power. To fully grasp the revolutionary implications of Göbekli Tepe, one must first understand the world from which it so spectacularly emerged, and then contrast it with the long-held narrative of human progress that its discovery has so profoundly challenged. 12,000 years ago, the Earth was in the final throes of the last Great Ice Age. The massive continental glaciers were in a steady, relentless retreat, and the global climate was transitioning into the warmer, more stable epoch known as the Holocene. The region known as the Fertile Crescent, a sweeping arc of land that includes southeastern Anatolia, was a world apart from the semi-arid landscapes we see today. It was a lush parkland savanna, a verdant mosaic of open woodlands and grasslands, incredibly rich with wild stands of einkorn wheat, barley, and rye, and dotted with groves of pistachio and almond trees. This was a world teeming with animal life. Vast herds of gazelle and wild ass, formidable aurochs whose size dwarfed modern cattle, and majestic red deer. This was not a world of scarcity and desperate struggle, but one of remarkable ecological abundance, a veritable paradise for the sophisticated hunter-gatherer peoples who had learned to thrive within its generous, though demanding, embrace. The social world of these early Neolithic people was likely structured around principles of egalitarianism and reciprocal sharing, social adaptations that were absolutely essential for survival in a nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyle. Bands were probably relatively small, consisting of extended families linked by complex kinship ties, their lives dictated by the migratory patterns of the game they hunted and the seasonal cycles of the wild plants they gathered. Their technology, while rooted in stone, was highly advanced and specialized. They were virtuosos of flint knapping, producing razor-sharp, pressure-flaked projectile points for their spears, delicate geometric microliths that were hafted into wood or bone to create composite tools, and finely serrated sickle blades that gleamed with a characteristic silica gloss from the endless harvesting of wild grasses. They wove intricate baskets and textiles from plant fibers, and they crafted beautiful personal adornments, beads of shell, bone, and stone, that speak to a deep-seated and universal human need for beauty, identity, and social expression. But critically, their entire material world was fundamentally portable. Their investments were in knowledge, in skill, in tools, and in the intricate web of social relationships, not in fixed, immovable structures. This is the core of what makes Göbekli Tepe so profoundly revolutionary. It represents a cataclysmic shift in human priorities, a move from a portable culture to a culture of permanence, an investment of colossal amounts of labor, identity, and collective spirit in one specific, hallowed place on a scale that had never been imagined before. The incredible resource abundance of the early Holocene Fertile Crescent is the indispensable key that unlocks the logistical mystery of Göbekli Tepe. This was not a society living perpetually on the brink of starvation, its energy entirely consumed by the daily struggle for survival. The rich, diverse environment provided a consistent surplus of food and, just as importantly, a surplus of time and human energy. When your basic nutritional needs can be met with a few days of skilled hunting and gathering per week, a significant reservoir of time is freed for other, more abstract pursuits, for extended social interaction, for complex storytelling, for elaborate ritual performances, and for ambitious artistic expression. This abundance created the necessary preconditions for what archaeologists term sedentism, the tendency for human groups to remain in one place for longer and longer periods. Groups may have begun to establish seasonal base camps, returning to the same productive locations year after year, their knowledge of the local resources deepening with each cycle. This growing, Enduring connection to a specific place would have fostered a stronger sense of territorial identity and communal history, and it provided the stable social and logistical context absolutely necessary for the planning and execution of a long-term, generational project like the construction of Göbekli Tepe. The psychological and spiritual world of these people was almost certainly animistic, a worldview that perceives a spirit or conscious essence within all natural phenomena. They lived in a universe that was thoroughly alive and sentient. The animals they hunted, the plants they gathered, the rocks of the hill, the water of the springs, the very wind that swept across the plains, all were imbued with consciousness and power. The boundary between the human and non-human worlds was fluid, permeable, and constantly negotiated. Shamans or spiritual specialists were likely individuals believed to possess the unique ability to traverse this boundary, entering ecstatic trance states through ritual, rhythm, or psychoactive substances to communicate with the spirit world for purposes of healing, divination, and to ensure the continued success of the hunt. The stunningly detailed animal carvings at Göbekli Tepe are a direct and powerful reflection of this worldview. The animals are not merely sources of food or simple representations. They are powerful spiritual beings, ancestors, clan totems, and guides. The act of building the monumental enclosures and of carefully, reverently carving these beings into the very fabric of the pillars was a way of creating a permanent, powerful portal to the spirit world, a fixed and enduring place where the entire community could gather at appointed times to negotiate their relationship with the potent, often dangerous, forces that govern their lives and their fortunes. This new, evidence-based understanding of the pre-pottery Neolithic world completely inverts the traditional narrative of the Neolithic Revolution, a narrative championed for decades by scholars like V. Gordon Childe. The old model presented a tidy, linear sequence of cause and effect. First, the domestication of plants and animals led to agriculture. Agriculture produced a food surplus that led to sedentary village life. This settled life and food surplus allowed for social stratification and craft specialization, and this new social complexity, finally, gave rise to organized religion and its ultimate expression, monumental architecture. Göbekli Tepe stands as a majestic, unassailable contradiction to this linear timeline. Here, we have the most sophisticated monumental architecture and the most complex symbolic expression first, built by hunter-gatherers at the apparent peak of their form. This has catalyzed a dramatic paradigm shift, giving rise to a new and compelling theory. Perhaps it was the pre-existing need to build and then maintain a grand, regional ritual center that itself provided the primary incentive for the development of agriculture. Feeding the large, concentrated groups of people who would have gathered at Göbekli Tepe for seasonal festivals, rituals, and ongoing construction projects would have placed an immense and unsustainable strain on the local wild resources. This very pressure, the theory suggests, may have provided the crucial incentive to begin intensively cultivating wild stands of grasses like einkorn wheat and to consciously manage wild herds of animals like sheep and goats, a process of increasing control and dependency that would, over centuries, lead irrevocably to full domestication. In this revolutionary and profoundly humbling view, the temple did not emerge from the village. Rather, the village and ultimately the entire edifice of civilization as we know it may have emerged from the spiritual and social demands of the temple. As we conclude this part of our journey into the dawn of human monumentality, we'd like to extend a special thank you for listening. If you're finding comfort in these archaeological explorations, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Slumber Expeditions. We would also love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to connect with our global community of curious minds. You can also share which part of the story has captivated you the most so far. It would be wonderful to start a conversation around it. Now, let the mystery of what we've uncovered so far settle in your mind as we prepare to continue our exploration. The consistent and overwhelming absence of evidence for domestic life at Göbekli Tepe, the lack of houses, of hearths for daily meal preparation, of grain storage facilities, of midden deposits indicating long-term habitation, points toward a single, inescapable conclusion. This was not a village or a town in any conventional sense. It was a specialized, non-utilitarian precinct, a regional cult center of staggering proportions and profound significance. The sheer monumental scale of the architecture, requiring the coordinated labor of hundreds, if not thousands of individuals, strongly suggests it served a population far larger than a single, roaming band of hunter-gatherers. It was likely a central place of gathering, a neutral and sacred ground for multiple, distinct groups scattered across the undulating plains and river valleys of Upper Mesopotamia. These groups would have converged upon this hill at specific, culturally ordained times of the year, perhaps synchronized with the solstices or equinoxes, or with key biological events such as the mass calving of the gazelle herds or the ripening of the wild wheat. These grand, seasonal gatherings would have been crucial for maintaining and reinforcing wide social networks, for the exchange of information and goods, for arranging marriages that would forge alliances between groups, and, most importantly, for collectively participating in rituals that reinforced a shared identity and a common worldview. The very process of constructing and then maintaining the enclosures would have itself been a powerful, unifying social ritual, a collective enterprise that strengthened communal bonds and created a tangible, enduring sense of shared purpose and monumental achievement. Evidence for large-scale, ritualized feasting is abundant and unequivocal across the site. Archaeologists have uncovered vast deposits of animal bones, piled high in specific areas, representing the carefully discarded remains of countless ceremonial meals. The zooarchaeological analysis of these bones reveals a fascinating and telling pattern. The animals consumed are almost exclusively wild species, with gazelle and the massive, now extinct aurochs constituting the overwhelming majority. This faunal profile definitively reinforces the hunter-gatherer identity of the builders and participants. These were people who were masters of the hunt, not managers of domesticated flocks. However, the sheer scale of consumption is what truly staggers the imagination. It is conservatively estimated that the bones found in just one concentrated deposit represent the remains of enough animal protein to feed many thousands of people. This was not quotidian subsistence. This was feasting on an epic, ritual scale. The preparation of such magnificent feasts would have been a complex logistical operation in its own right, requiring the coordinated hunting, butchering, cooking, and serving of vast quantities of meat, likely in large, communal earth ovens or roasting pits. The act of consuming this food, shared communally among the entire gathered populace, would have been a potent ritual act in itself, a physical sacrament that cemented social solidarity and created a direct, visceral connection between the people, the powerful animal spirits they revered, and the sacred space they had collectively created and inhabited. The complex social organization required to envision, build, and sustain Göbekli Tepe over centuries implies a level of socio-political complexity previously thought impossible for pre-agricultural societies. This immediately raises profound questions about leadership and social structure. Who possessed the authority to direct such a vast labor force? Who held the architectural and astronomical knowledge to design the enclosures with such precision? Who orchestrated the intricate and likely esoteric rituals that took place within them? It is highly unlikely that a purely egalitarian society, without any form of centralized decision-making or social hierarchy, could have accomplished this. While Göbekli Tepe may not represent a fully stratified chiefdom with a hereditary, coercive ruling class, it almost certainly required some form of emergent, situational leadership. This could have taken the form of a council of respected elders, representing the different clans that gathered there. It could have been the domain of particularly influential shamans or spiritual practitioners, individuals believed to possess a unique connection to the spirit world, whose authority was derived from their perceived knowledge and spiritual power. Or it could have been charismatic individuals, skilled organizers who could plan the projects, motivate the labor force, and oversee the complex logistics of the feasts and rituals. The site itself may have been the very crucible in which these new forms of social hierarchy were forged, a place where certain individuals or specific lineages began to accumulate prestige, influence, and perhaps even a degree of authority through their pivotal roles in the cult and its monumental expression. The precise nature of the rituals performed within the high-walled enclosures of Göbekli Tepe is, and will likely remain, largely a matter of informed speculation. However, the architecture and iconography provide us with a series of powerful, tantalizing clues. The enclosures, with their imposing, solid walls, would have created a restricted, inward-focused space, deliberately hidden from the outside world and the uninitiated. This suggests that the rituals were not public spectacles designed for a general audience, but were likely esoteric, their full meaning and power reserved for initiates or for specific, privileged segments of the society. The presence of small, niche-like rooms nestled between the larger enclosures, and the discovery of numerous portable stone vessels, bowls, cups, and platters, hint at activities involving the preparation, presentation, and consumption of special substances, perhaps ritual beverages or offerings. The anthropomorphic pillars themselves may have been the primary congregation or the divine audience for the rituals. One can easily imagine the sensory overwhelm of these ceremonies. Masked dancers, clad in the hides and feathers of the sacred animals carved on the pillars, embodying the spirits of these creatures, performing powerful myths of creation, the hunt, and the ancestral past in the flickering, dramatic light of torches and hearths. The air would have been thick with the smells of roasting meat, smoke, and incense, while the space resonated with the hypnotic, rhythmic pounding of drums, the haunting notes of bone flutes, and the rising and falling cadence of communal chanting, all designed to induce altered states of consciousness, to dissolve the individual into the collective, and to foster a powerful, transcendent experience of communal unity and connection with the cosmic order. One of the most enduring and poignant mysteries of Göbekli Tepe is its relationship with the dead. Intriguingly, no formal burials have been discovered within the main enclosures themselves, which is somewhat surprising for a site of such profound and overt spiritual significance. However, the numerous, stark depictions of headless humans and the prominent role of vultures have led to the compelling and widely discussed theory that Göbekli Tepe may have functioned as a central node in a regional skull cult or as a designated site for excarnation rituals. Scattered human bones, including fragments of crania, have been found within the fill used to bury the site. Some of these human remains show clear signs of post-mortem modification, such as deliberate carvings and the application of red ochre, practices known from other roughly contemporary sites in the region like Jerf el Ahmar and Keonu. It is a plausible, though still unproven, scenario that the primary stone circles were used for the initial, sacred process of defleshing the dead by vultures and other elements. This would not have been viewed as a desecration, but rather as a sacred transformation, a return of the physical body to the great cycle of nature, with the vulture acting as a divine mediator, a creature that carried the soul skyward to the realm of the ancestors. The carefully preserved skulls of important ancestors may then have been curated, ritually decorated, and perhaps even displayed within the enclosures or in associated smaller buildings, serving as powerful, tangible relics that connected the living community directly to their mythical past and to the enduring presence of their forebears. This would place the veneration of ancestors and the management of death at the very heart of the Göbekli Tepe cult, with the monumental T-shaped pillars themselves serving as permanent, stylized representations of those ancestors, silently watching over the rituals of the living and the sacred transformation of the dead. As our understanding of Göbekli Tepe has matured, researchers have increasingly turned their gaze from the earth towards the heavens, seeking clues to its purpose and meaning in the orderly motions of the celestial bodies. The interdisciplinary field of archeoastronomy, the study of how ancient peoples understood, observed, and integrated astronomical phenomena into their cultural and physical landscapes, has proposed a fascinating and provocative possibility: that the enclosures of Göbekli Tepe were not only temples of profound spiritual significance, but also functioned as sophisticated astronomical observatories. The precise cardinal orientation and the specific alignments of the massive stone pillars, some researchers argue, may have been deliberately calibrated to mark significant celestial events, such as the rising and setting of the sun, moon, and particularly bright stars on the solstices, equinoxes, and other key dates in the cosmic calendar. For a society whose survival, mythology, and ritual life were intimately tied to the cyclical patterns of the natural world, the migration of animals, the ripening of wild grains, the seasonal rains, the ability to accurately predict the turning of the year would have been knowledge of paramount importance, imbued with both immense practical utility and deep sacred power. One of the most prominent astronomical theories, advanced by researchers like Giulio Magli, focuses intently on the orientation of Enclosure D, the largest and most well-preserved of all the structures yet uncovered at the site. This theory suggests that a key sight line, perhaps an intentionally narrow gap between the two central pillars or a specific sighting stone placed within the enclosure, was meticulously aligned with the point on the horizon where the star Sirius first rose just before the sun, an event known as its heliacal rising, around 9300 BCE. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, has been an object of intense fascination and reverence for countless cultures throughout human history. Its heliacal rising often marked a critical turning point in the agricultural or seasonal calendar, signaling the onset of the hot, dry summer months in the Mediterranean world or, in the case of ancient Egypt, the annual flooding of the Nile. For the hunter-gatherers of Göbekli Tepe, the reappearance of Sirius could have heralded the beginning of a specific, crucial hunting season, the time for gathering a key resource, or the moment to begin preparations for a major seasonal gathering and its associated rituals. Other researchers have pointed to potential alignments with the solstice sun, whose rising and setting points on the horizon mark the extreme boundaries of its yearly journey, or with the shimmering band of the Milky Way, which features prominently in the creation mythology and cosmological beliefs of many later cultures around the globe. The rich and complex animal iconography itself has not escaped the lens of astronomical interpretation. A more speculative, yet intellectually stimulating, theory proposes that the entire menagerie of creatures carved on the pillars does not merely represent the terrestrial animals of the Anatolian plains, but also serves as a symbolic code for the constellations that adorn the night sky. The scorpion, for instance, could be a direct representation of the constellation Scorpio. The duck or goose might relate to an ancient water-associated asterism that we now identify as part of Libra or another constellation. The fox could correspond to Lupus or another star pattern. In this captivating view, the pillars become three-dimensional star charts, their surfaces telling complex stories not just of the Earth, but of the entire cosmos. The sacred narratives enacted within the stone circles through ritual and performance would then be celestial dramas, myths that explain the movements of the heavens, the relationships between the star beings, and humanity's humble place within this vast, cosmic order. This would represent a level of abstract thought, long-term observational science, and symbolic sophistication that is truly astonishing for such an early period in human history. However, it is crucial to note that the astronomical interpretations of Göbekli Tepe are met with healthy skepticism and rigorous critique from many within the mainstream archaeological community. These critics rightly urge a stance of methodological caution, pointing out the significant challenges inherent in archaeoastronomical studies, especially for a site of such immense antiquity. The precise positions of stars have gradually shifted over millennia due to the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, a phenomenon known as the precession of the equinoxes, making accurate retrocalculation a complex and sometimes ambiguous task. Furthermore, the enclosures are not perfectly circular, and the pillars are not always positioned with the laser-like precision one might expect of a modern observatory, leaving considerable room for subjective interpretation and the well-documented human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns, or pareidolia, even where none were originally intended. These skeptics persuasively argue that the overwhelming evidence for domestic and ritual activity on the ground, the monumental scale of the feasting, the evidence for large-scale tool production, the iconography of power, danger, and ancestor veneration, is more than sufficient to explain the site's profound cultural importance without necessarily invoking an additional, complex celestial function. In all likelihood, the profound truth of Göbekli Tepe lies not in choosing one interpretation over the other, but in a holistic synthesis of these ideas. The people of this distant age lived in a world where the celestial and the terrestrial were not separate, disconnected realms, but were intimately woven together into a single, interconnected, and meaningful whole. The cyclical movements of the stars and the sun were mirrored in, and gave sacred structure to, the migrations of the animals and the life cycles of the plants upon which they depended. A single vulture carving on a pillar could simultaneously represent the literal vultures involved in excarnation rituals, a specific clan totem, a spiritual guide for the souls of the dead, and a symbolic representation for a specific constellation or celestial phenomenon. The architecture could have been deliberately designed to be cosmologically significant, orienting the sacred space within the larger cosmos and aligning it with the fundamental rhythms of the universe, without necessarily functioning as a precise, technical observatory in the modern, scientific sense. The very act of building the enclosures in symbolic alignment with celestial bodies would have been a profound way of bringing cosmic order down to earth, of grounding their mythology and their identity in the very landscape, of creating a powerful sacred geography where heaven and earth met, and where the community could feel itself to be an integral part of a vast, beautiful, and orderly cosmos. Perhaps the most baffling and philosophically rich aspect of the entire Göbekli Tepe narrative is not its spectacular construction, but its deliberate and meticulously planned demise. Around 8000 BCE, after more than a millennium and a half of continuous use, veneration, and modification, the entire complex was carefully, systematically, and completely buried. This was not an act of violent destruction, not the result of a sudden invasion, a catastrophic fire, or an earthquake. There are no signs of conflict, of hasty abandonment, or of structural collapse. Instead, it was a slow, patient process of infilling, a conscious act of interment. The enclosures were filled with a remarkable mixture of soil, stone rubble, limestone chips from tool-making, animal bones from feasts, and other cultural debris, material that appears to have been gathered from the surrounding hillsides and from the site's own extensive midden deposits. This was not random trash disposal, it was a purposeful, ritualized entombment of an entire sacred landscape. The fill was packed in deliberate, strategic layers, and the work was executed with such astonishing care that the structures were preserved in a state of near-perfect integrity, which is the primary reason they have survived in such magnificent condition for us to discover 12 millennia later. The question of why this was done is one of the site's most profound and enduring puzzles. One of the leading theories, and perhaps the most spiritually resonant, is that the burial constituted a formal ritual decommissioning. In many cultures, both ancient and modern, when a sacred structure or powerful ritual object has served its purpose, has become spiritually saturated, or is deemed to have lost its potency, it is ceremonially killed or retired through a specific set of rituals. Burying the enclosures of Göbekli Tepe may have been the ultimate act of respectful closure, a way of laying the powerful spirits of the place to rest, of returning them to the earth from which they were originally drawn. The act of filling them with the material remains of the community's life, the tools, the feasting debris, the byproducts of their industry, could have been a final, grand offering, a symbolic feast for the gods or the ancestors, a last act of communion that sealed the sacred covenant between the people and their spiritual world before the site was consigned to the earth. This theory suggests that the belief system that gave birth to Göbekli Tepe had, over the centuries, gradually evolved or had been supplanted by a new, emerging worldview. The old ways, with their terrifying animal gods, their ancestor cults, and their colossal stone pillars, were no longer relevant to a changing society, and the site was therefore ceremonially and reverently closed, its power safely contained within the womb of the hill. Another compelling theory links the burial directly to the profound social and economic transformations that were sweeping across the Fertile Crescent during this very period, the slow, revolutionary adoption of agriculture. By 800 BCE, the first definitively domesticated plants, like einkorn wheat, and animals such as sheep and goats, were beginning to appear in the archaeological record of the region. The hunter-gatherer way of life that had spawned the vision of Göbekli Tepe was gradually, inexorably giving way to a new, agricultural society rooted in fixed villages and the control of domesticated species. This fundamental economic transition would have been accompanied by an equally radical shift in human consciousness and worldview. The old myths, centered on the wild, untamed power of animals and the sacred drama of the hunt, may have lost their potency and their central place in the human psyche for a society that was now increasingly dependent on domesticated crops and managed herds. The new gods may have been deities of fertility, of rain, of the sown field, and the harvested grain, gods of a tamed, controlled, and predictable nature. In this scenario, the deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe could represent a powerful symbolic rejection of the old hunter-gatherer ideology. The people, now becoming farmers, consciously and physically entombed their ancestral past, literally covering up the monumental symbols of a lifestyle and a spiritual universe they were consciously leaving behind. It was an act of cultural forgetting, a deliberate break with tradition to embrace a new, sedentary identity and its accompanying cosmology. A third, more pragmatic theory suggests that the highly complex social structure required to maintain and operate a regional cult center like Göbekli Tepe simply could not be sustained and eventually collapsed under its own weight or from external pressures. The very spirit of cooperation and shared purpose that had built the site may have fractured as different groups became more territorial with the advent of agriculture and settled village life, their interests and identities becoming more localized and potentially conflicting. The large, seasonal gatherings that were the lifeblood of Göbekli Tepe may have become logistically untenable or socially undesirable due to emerging conflicts or competing demands on labor and resources. Without the collective will and the organized social mechanisms to maintain the structures, they would have begun a slow process of decay. The final, communal act of burial, then, could have been a practical and respectful solution to prevent the sacred site from falling into visible ruin and desecration, a way of preserving its sanctity and its powerful memory even as the society that had built it fragmented and transformed into something new. It was better, perhaps, to bury it whole and intact, like a revered ancestor in a sealed tomb, than to let it slowly crumble into a state of disrespectful decay, its power leaching away into a forgotten landscape. The great, poignant irony of this deliberate burial is that the act intended to erase Göbekli Tepe from human memory and to consign it to oblivion is the very reason we are able to study it in such stunning detail today. The layers of protective fill, carefully packed around the pillars and walls, shielded the delicate limestone carvings from 12,000 years of erosion, from frost wedging, from root damage, and from later human activity that would have undoubtedly quarried the visible stones for other purposes. The hill, after its burial, became a gentle, unassuming mound, a potbelly hill that gave no hint of the spectacular architecture and profound art hidden just beneath the surface. It was simply a place for shepherds and their flocks, its world-altering secret held safe for 400 generations, waiting for a curious shepherd and a persistent, intuitive archaeologist to ask the right questions and begin the slow process of unveiling the lost world it contained. This deliberate, ancient act of concealment is the final, elegant, and deeply moving layer of the Göbekli Tepe mystery, a silent testament to a people who, for reasons we can only ponder with a sense of awe and humility, decided that their greatest collective achievement was something that needed to be given back, tenderly and completely, to the earth. As we conclude this part of our journey into the world's first temple, we'd like to extend a special thank you for listening. If you're finding comfort in these archaeological explorations, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Slumber Expeditions. We would also love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to connect with our global community of curious minds. You can also share which part of the story has captivated you the most so far. It would be wonderful to start a conversation around it. Now, let the mystery of what we've uncovered so far settle in your mind as we prepare to continue our exploration. The discovery and ongoing interpretation of Göbekli Tepe have sent seismic, irrevocable shockwaves through the foundational narratives of archaeology, anthropology, and our understanding of human development. For decades, the prevailing model of the Neolithic revolution, often neatly packaged and taught as an inevitable sequence, was a linear and economically deterministic one. Climate change at the end of the Ice Age provided new opportunities. These opportunities led to the domestication of plants and animals. Domestication led directly to agriculture. Agriculture produced a food surplus that enabled sedentary village life. This settled existence allowed for social stratification and craft, specialization, and this new social complexity, finally, created the conditions for organized religion and its ultimate expression in monumental architecture. Göbekli Tepe stands as a majestic, unassailable contradiction to this comfortable, stair-step progression. Here, we have the most sophisticated monumental architecture and the most complex, integrated symbolic expression preceding all the other elements of the so-called Neolithic package. It was built by hunter-gatherers for an overtly religious purpose, and it now appears to have been not a product of agricultural surplus, but quite possibly the very catalyst that spurred the development of settled, farming life. This single site has forced a dramatic and profound paradigm shift, compelling us to reconsider the very engines of cultural change. This new model, often termed the Göbekli Tepe model, or the symbolic first hypothesis, posits that the deep-seated human drive for symbolic expression, communal ritual, and in the construction of a shared cosmological identity may have been a primary, rather than a secondary, engine for social complexity. According to this revolutionary view, it was the pre-existing need to build, maintain, and gather at a grand, regional ritual center that provided the initial incentive for hunter-gatherer bands to cooperate on a previously unimaginable scale. This cooperation required new levels of social organization, labor coordination, and long-term planning. It encouraged a more sedentary pattern, as groups needed to remain near the sacred site to oversee its construction and to prepare for the seasonal gatherings. This nascent settled life, in turn, placed unprecedented and concentrated pressure on the local wild resources of game and grains. This very pressure, the theory suggests, created the practical necessity to begin intensively cultivating wild grasses and to consciously manage wild herds, setting in motion the slow, centuries-long process of domestication. In this elegantly inverted scenario, it was not the farmer who built the temple, it was the organizational and spiritual demands of the temple that ultimately created the farmer. Religion, it seems, may not be a beautiful, complex flower that bloomed from the soil of civilization, but may instead be one of the very seeds from which civilization itself sprouted. The site has also fundamentally and permanently altered our perception of hunter-gatherer societies, dismantling long-held, often condescending, stereotypes. The traditional image of small, nomadic, and technologically simple bands living a hand-to-mouth existence in a constant struggle for survival has been shattered by the evidence on this Anatolian hill. Göbekli Tepe reveals that some hunter-gatherer societies, when existing in environments of exceptional abundance, could achieve a level of social organization, artistic sophistication, and collective effort that rivals, and in many cases significantly predates, that of the earliest agricultural societies. They were not simply passive children of nature, merely reacting to their environment. They were active, conscious shapers of their world, capable of grand vision, long-term intergenerational projects, and the creation of a complex symbolic universe that they expressed in the most enduring medium they could conceive: monumental stone. This evidence forces us to abandon simplistic, unilinear evolutionary scales that implicitly place hunter-gatherer on a lower rung than farmer. It suggests that social complexity can arise from multiple, diverse pathways, and that the hunter-gatherer way of life, in the right ecological and social conditions, could be a rich, stable, and highly sophisticated adaptation in its own right, capable of producing wonders that would not be surpassed for thousands of years. Göbekli Tepe did not, of course, exist in a cultural vacuum. Its discovery has acted as a key that has unlocked a new understanding of other pre-pottery Neolithic sites across the Fertile Crescent, revealing a previously unsuspected level of cultural interaction and shared tradition. Sites like Novali Kori, now submerged under the waters of the Ataturk Dam, also featured T-shaped pillars and strikingly similar iconography, suggesting a shared symbolic language and architectural vocabulary across a wide geographic area. Cheonu, with its unique skull building containing the remains of over 400 individuals, provides powerful, independent evidence for the complex funerary practices and ancestor cults hinted at by the headless human figures at Göbekli Tepe. Jerf el-Ahmar, on the Syrian Euphrates, shows evidence of large, communal structures that predate domestication. Together, these sites are no longer seen as isolated, curious anomalies, but as nodes in a vast, interconnected cultural network that flourished for millennia before the rise of agriculture. This emerging picture is of a pre-pottery Neolithic world that was far more complex, interconnected, and symbolically rich than anyone had previously dared to imagine, a world where the spiritual and the social were the driving forces of human innovation and organization. The philosophical implications of this new narrative are as profound as the archaeological ones. Göbekli Tepe challenges the deeply ingrained materialist perspective that views human history primarily as a story of technological and economic progress. It suggests that the human mind, with its capacity for abstract thought, its yearning for meaning, and its need to create and belong to something larger than itself, has always been a powerful historical force. The first monuments were not granaries or defensive walls. They were temples. The first great coordinated human endeavors were not for material gain or territorial control, but for spiritual expression and communal identity. This places the realm of ideas, beliefs, and symbols at the very heart of the human story. It suggests that what makes us truly human is not merely our ability to manipulate our environment for survival, but our profound and enduring need to understand our place within the cosmos, to ritualize our existence, and to leave behind a testament to our beliefs that will whisper to the future long after we are gone. Göbekli Tepe is that whisper, grown into a declarative voice, reminding us that civilization may have been born not in a field of wheat, but in a circle of stones, raised towards the stars by a people who dared to believe. Despite the decades of meticulous excavation and intense scholarly analysis, Göbekli Tepe remains, at its heart, a place of deep and abiding mystery. For every question that has been answered, several more have emerged, each one more tantalizing than the last, ensuring that the hill will continue to captivate and challenge researchers for generations to come. One of the most fundamental and persistent enigmas surrounds the identity of the builders themselves. We know they were hunter-gatherers, but who were they as a people? What was their specific ethnic or linguistic identity? The site itself, as a regional cult center, likely served multiple, distinct groups. Were these groups unified by a common language and a shared ethnic origin, or was Göbekli Tepe a neutral, sacred meeting ground for diverse peoples who shared only a common cosmological belief system? The silent stones offer no answers to these questions of identity and kinship, leaving us to wonder about the faces and the voices of the people who gathered here, their stories and their names forever lost to time. The logistical intricacies of the construction also hold many unresolved puzzles. While we can theorize about the use of ropes, log rollers, and large labor forces, the exact engineering techniques employed remain speculative. How did they achieve such precise shaping of the pillars with their stone tools? Were there specialized architects or master builders who directed the work, possessing knowledge of geometry and structural engineering that was passed down orally? Furthermore, the organization of the labor force itself is a subject of intense debate. Was this labor a form of religious devotion, willingly given by all members of the society during seasonal gatherings? Or was it a form of corvée labor, an obligation demanded by an emerging elite class of priests or chieftains? The absence of any defensive walls or signs of social conflict suggests a cooperative, voluntary effort, but the scale of the work implies a level of social coercion or hierarchy that is difficult to reconcile with a purely egalitarian model. The social mechanics behind this first great building project remain just out of reach, a ghost in the machine of this Neolithic wonder. The purpose and meaning of the T-shaped pillars, while broadly interpreted as anthropomorphic, are still shrouded in symbolic ambiguity. If they represent beings, who or what are they specifically? Are they a pantheon of gods, each enclosure dedicated to a different deity whose attributes are signaled by the animals carved upon its central pillars? Are they deified ancestors, the founders of the clans that built the enclosures? Or are they powerful, impersonal forces of nature, the spirit of the hunt, the essence of the sun, the embodiment of death, given a human-like form? The fact that they are faceless is particularly significant. Does this imply a belief in a universal, abstract spiritual force that transcends individual personality? Or was the face perhaps added in a perishable material, such as painted plaster or wood, that has long since decayed? The precise nature of the beliefs that mandated this specific, unique form of representation is a code we have not yet fully broken. The ultimate reason for the site's deliberate burial continues to be one of its most compelling mysteries. While the theories of ritual decommissioning, ideological shift, or social collapse are persuasive, they are ultimately unproven. Could there have been a more specific, catalytic event? A prophetic dream or a new oracle that declared the old gods must be returned to the earth? A devastating plague or a period of climatic instability that was interpreted as divine displeasure with the old ways? The burial was so systematic and comprehensive that it must have been a decision of immense cultural importance, a collective act that required the consensus of the entire regional population. What was the final ceremony like? Was it a somber, mournful event, a funeral for a way of life? Or was it a hopeful, transformative ritual, a symbolic planting of the old world so that a new one could grow? The silence that followed the burial is absolute, and the motivation behind this final, definitive act remains one of history's most eloquent and unanswered questions. Finally, the shadow of Theia, the hypothetical impactor planet in the Earth-Moon formation story, has a conceptual parallel at Göbekli Tepe, the question of what came before. The earliest layers of the site, dating to 9600 BCE, are already staggeringly sophisticated. This level of architectural and symbolic complexity does not appear overnight. It must have had precursors, a long period of development in wood, in smaller stone structures, or in oral traditions that we have not yet found. Where are the experimental phases, the prototypes for the T-shaped pillar? The site itself suggests that the revolution represented by Göbekli Tepe was itself the product of a long, slow evolution. Are its true origins hidden in even deeper, unexcavated layers of the hill? Or are they scattered across the Anatolian plateau, in sites yet to be discovered, holding the secrets of the first stirrings of this monumental vision? Göbekli Tepe, for all it has revealed, ultimately points backward to an even deeper past, a hidden chapter in the human story that we are only just beginning to realize exists. The hill has given us immense answers, but in doing so, it has posed even greater, more profound questions. As our long, quiet journey through the world of Göbekli Tepe draws to its gentle close, we are left not with simple conclusions, but with a sense of profound and humbling connection. This hill in Turkey is more than an archaeological site. It is a bridge across an unimaginable gulf of time, connecting our modern, complex world directly to the minds of our hunter-gatherer ancestors. The stones do not speak in words, but they communicate with a powerful, emotional clarity. They tell us of a people who looked upon the same stars we see tonight, who felt the same wind on their faces, and who grappled with the same fundamental human questions of life, death, community, and meaning. Their answer was to build, to carve their understanding of the world into the very bones of the earth, to create a place where the community could transcend its individual parts and touch the eternal. The legacy of Göbekli Tepe is not confined to the past. It is a living legacy that continues to shape our present understanding of ourselves. It has democratized human genius, showing us that the capacity for great art, complex organization, and spiritual profundity is not the sole province of so-called civilized peoples with writing and cities. It is a universal human potential, one that could flower in its own majestic way within a hunter-gatherer context. This site is a permanent corrective to hubris, a reminder that our current path is not the only one humanity has walked, and that the past is far stranger, more complex, and more wonderful than we had ever supposed. It teaches us humility before the ingenuity of our ancestors and respect for the diverse pathways of human culture. For the wider world, Göbekli Tepe has become a powerful symbol of cultural heritage and a beacon of mystery. It draws visitors from across the globe, not just as tourists, but as pilgrims to a place that fundamentally reshapes their sense of human history. It has inspired artists, writers, and filmmakers, its enigmatic pillars becoming icons of a deep, almost mythical past. The site stands as a testament to the importance of preserving our shared human story, a story that is constantly being rewritten by the patient work of trowels and the brilliant light of scientific inquiry. It is a global treasure, a gift from the depths of time that belongs to all of humanity. On a personal contemplative level, Göbekli Tepe invites a slow, quiet kind of wonder. It encourages us to step away from the frantic pace of the modern world and to consider the long, slow arcs of time. The people who built this place invested their lives in a project whose full meaning they knew they would never see, a project for future generations, for the ancestors yet unborn. There is a profound peace in this perspective, a sense that our own lives, with all their struggles and triumphs, are part of a much grander, more patient narrative. The builders of Göbekli Tepe found their purpose not in personal accumulation, but in collective creation, in adding their verse to a sacred story written in stone. So, as you drift towards sleep, let the image of those silent, T-shaped pillars standing beneath a canopy of ancient stars settle in your mind. They are a reminder that the first human monuments were not to war or to wealth, but to wonder. They were an attempt to grasp the intangible, to build a ladder to the heavens, to ask the great questions of existence, and to inscribe those questions permanently into the landscape. The mystery of Göbekli Tepe is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be absorbed, that at the very dawn of our journey, the human spirit was already capable of sublime, monumental beauty, driven by a need to connect, to believe, and to create something that would echo long after the individual voice was silenced. The echo has reached us here, now, across 12,000 years. It is a soft, persistent, and beautiful sound, a lullaby from the depths of time, reminding you of the incredible, enduring, and peaceful power of the human spirit. Thank you for joining us on this slumber expedition to the world's first temple. May the quiet mystery of Göbekli Tepe fill your dreams with a sense of deep time and wondrous peace. Good night.